Welcome back. It's time for another edition of Silver and Black today here on The Bet in Las Vegas, if you're listening to us on the radio, and always as an Odyssey original podcast covering your Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders turn the page. They're in Los Angeles, of course, have been practicing against the Rams this week. They will gear up to face the Rams at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern on Saturday at SoFi Stadium for their second contest of the preseason. Hi, I'm your host, Scott Gulbransen, along with my partner. He is the senior NFL writer at Bleacher Report. His name is Mr. Moe Moton. You can follow him on Twitter at MOEMOTON. I am at LV Gully. The show is SNB Today. Okay, Mo, we start looking ahead, but some news in Raider Nation. Of course, we heard the terrible news for the young man on Tuesday, and that was Brandon Parker, who was injured last week in the practices, the joint practices with the San Francisco 49ers, is going to miss another season. The same thing happened to him last season. Brandon Parker was slated to be a reserve offensive lineman, and the Raiders now find themselves a lineman down, which in the NFL, when it comes to attrition, you can never have too many of anything. And so I did a blitz yesterday here on the podcast feed about his loss and how people might poo-poo it a little bit and say, hey, okay, yeah, Brandon Parker, he wasn't very good anyway. But in reality, anytime you lose guys up front, Mo, it's a big deal. Now they're going to have to go out and figure out what they do to possibly replace him. Somebody's got to come in, learn the playbook, unless they come from the New England tree or something like that. But it's unfortunate for the young guy, Brandon Parker. He doesn't get an opportunity for another year to maybe perhaps improve and try to get some playing time and give the Raiders some of that depth they so desperately need.
The Raiders apparently see something in Brandon Parker that we don't, because I honestly didn't have him making the roster anyway. To be honest with you, I did not envision him making the 50-man simply because Justin Herron got most of the snaps at left tackle in that preseason game. He's a former Patriot, so he has an inroads with this coaching staff. And there's been a lot of buzz about Thayer Mumford pushing Jermaine Illuminar. So if he's pushing Jermaine Illuminar for the right tackle job, at worst, he's going to be the backup swing guy. So to me, Brandon Parker was fighting for the 4th, 5th spot. Dalton Wagner, the undrafted rookie, had a pretty good outing against the 49ers. So maybe that's his immediate replacement there. But tough break for Brandon Parker, as you said, 2 years in a row, getting injured, going on IR before the season even starts. Who knows where his career goes from here, but you hope that he heals up and maybe continues somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think the point is, when guys go down on a team, to your point, maybe he would have made the roster, maybe he wouldn't have. The Raiders signed him to a 1-year deal, was not any kind of risk from a financial standpoint for them to do that because he's easily discarded, if you will. But that disruption, you get to go when you work somewhere. I always try to bring it back to everybody's daily life, right? That listens to the show, and that is, you work with people, Mo. You work with a staff of writers and editors over at Bleacher Report and at Sportsnaut, and you get to know those guys, right? And you get into rhythm. Yeah, people come and go all the time. That's a natural part of business, of work, of life. But at the same time, you start to develop that cohesive group. I mean, even you and I doing this show together. It's why I always tell you off the air, I don't think I would ever do the show anymore if you couldn't do it, because it's just gotten to the point where it's like, I like the rhythm. I like this. And it doesn't mean that you can't go on and do other things, but it does disrupt a team a little bit more than people believe.
Yeah. And I think we're not at practice, so we don't see this, but some offensive linemen develop a relationship with other offensive linemen based on who they play with. So if you're a left tackle, you're maybe used to playing with a certain left guard. If you're a right guard, maybe you're used to playing with a certain right tackle. I think Jermaine Illuminar talked about this. I think it was Jermaine Illuminar talked about this, being able to develop a relationship, a rapport with a guy that's playing right next to you. So I think that part of it is important. But as Josh McDaniel said, these offensive linemen, they have to get used to playing with different guys, different combinations, because there's a very, very, very slim chance that your offensive linemen are going to be healthy for the entire season. So guys have to be ready to fill in certain spots, not just play one position. You have to be comfortable with playing not with just one guy, but 2, 3, 4 other guys on that offensive line.
No question. And the Raiders now, they move into this weekend coming up. Of course, practices with the Rams again today and going into Saturday. But you look at this game, we saw with the Raiders, we've already exhausted or talked a lot about the conversation, and Mo was on assignment, so he couldn't be with Vinny on Tuesday. But in talking about it, the one thing that sticks out is you can look at individual performances. Of course, we're talking later in the show, by the way, to Tom DeHart from goldenblack.com, who covered Aidan O'Connell in college. So we're going to give Aidan O'Connell some more coverage here to talk about his development, who he is, but not to get too caught in the stats just yet. They're definitely a guide for us to see where some of these guys might be against competition. But it's interesting because as the Raiders came out of Saturday's win, it's a real interesting duality about the preseason, Mo, right? Which is people, what's the big deal? They're playing against they're not playing against starters, they're playing against second, third string. But had the Raiders lost and gotten beat 34-7, what would people be saying? They'd be saying, "Oh gosh, it's going to be a long year." So yes, you can't weight it too much either way when you win or lose in the preseason. But as Vinny and I discussed on Tuesday, Mo, the fashion in which they are playing, the discipline which you're starting to see, doesn't mean they always succeed. But I saw during that game is what I want to see again. I want to see it repeat against the Rams, which is no stupid mistakes, seeing a defense that's swarming defense doesn't always mean you'll win the battles. And, of course, on the offense, continuing to execute. And you'd like to see the run game, even though you and I disagreed on our excitement over Zamir White, you want to see the running game get better. You want to see them do a little more than they've done. But overall, Mo, the culture and installing that culture in Vegas with this team seems to be taking hold. Doesn't mean they're going to win 12 games. It just means, though, you can kind of see that on the field. Am I wrong on that? Did you see it as well?
It's funny because on my first Silver and Black Blitz, I talked about the theme of the episode is basically, what do I want to see more of? What does Mo want to see more of in the second preseason game? And to your point is, yes, it is just preseason, but you want to see the consistency because eventually you're going to see results, right? I compare this to a person who's trying to lose weight, right? But actually, I won't go there since I'm on the other side of the spectrum. At one point in my life, I was trying to gain weight, right? I was maybe 140 pounds coming out of college, and I was like, man, I want to be about 160, 165. So I start eating whole pizzas and pasta every day,
cheesecake.
All types of carbs. I'm loaded up on carbs and protein, and I'm barely seeing any results. And I'm like, this is not working. This is just not working. I start loading up on protein shakes, but over time, it took repetition and consistency. I saw some progress, and that, now I'm about, I'm at a good weight now. I'll say that. but my point is that for the fans saying that, yes, we went 4-0. The Rays went 4-0 in the preseason last year. What's different this year? If they win all these games and show good performances, is no different. We can still go 6-11. Yes, that is true. But sometimes results don't always come right away. Sometimes it takes time. It's my point about gaining weight or losing weight. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you start a routine and it doesn't show right away. It takes some time. So for the Raiders, just understand that second year under Josh McDaniels and his coaching staff, it could take some time. It could take 2 years for the results to start to show in the regular season.
Right. And that's where I said, if you go back to the summer, we were talking about expectations for this team. And yes, the expectation of a man making millions of dollars to coach a team is you win, right? But we also talked about, since they had to go backward and kind of rebuild a little bit on this roster, that you have to start to look for progression. To your point, in your blitz from yesterday afternoon, you said it perfectly about consistency, right? You want to see consistency. Consistency does not mean, to the point you just made with the weight loss or weight gain. For me, it's the previous weight loss. I need to do some more of that. But when you look at that, you want to see the consistency. Are they consistently executing plays, for example? If they are and the results aren't good, you could still say, hey, look, they're doing it the right way. It just hasn't broken yet. Or in the case of the running back, let's say Zamir White is what he is and he's just a good backup running back, a change of pace guy. Then you say, okay, if Josh Jacobs decides to hold out and you have Zamir White and they're executing the plays and you just don't have the talent there, then you know what to do next time. You know you need to go get a running back, for example. So to me, that's where I think as a fan, it's very difficult. And I know we do it from an objective standpoint, but as a fan, you get emotional. You want your team to win always. But that's why I'm telling fans this year, look for that. So if you have a position like linebacker, they're not great at linebacker. We all know that. But if you see linebackers that are out there today and they're doing what they're supposed to be and they're being where they're supposed to be and they get beat, okay, that's a talent issue, but at least they're executing. And so that game inside the game to me is going to be fascinating to watch for the remainder of this preseason.
The one point I want to make about is just preseason for those people who are saying that. Well, it was just preseason for Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Anthony Richardson, and those guys didn't look nearly as impressive against backups as Aiden O'Connell did. Yeah. So on an even playing field, while you can say it's just backups, it's just second, third stringers, well, his peers had the same competition, and they didn't play as well as he did. So you got to give him credit for that. I believe Pro Football Focus graded Aiden O'Connell the best rookie of the week one of the preseason. Now, Pro Football Focus or any type of analytical grades are subjective there, but it goes to show that his performance is getting recognized, and he was one of the top performers, if not the top performer, outside of maybe Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the Cleveland Browns in that Hall of Fame game. Top rookie performer. So you can't take anything away from him. And you saw a lot of, as you said, you saw a lot of good things. So you just want to see that consistency from a rookie.
Right. And as Vinny told us on Tuesday, Mo, he wasn't surprised by it because he said he's been seeing it in practice. And I know sometimes we even can be critical of guys like Vinny and other reporters are out there, talking about, oh, this player's on fire during training camp when it's only training camp. But, these are guys who've watched the NFL for a long time. So if they come out and they say, hey, look, he's having a good camp, he looks really good, that doesn't mean he's going to be the starting quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders. That doesn't mean he's the next incarnation of Tom Brady. That does not mean he's going to be a Hall of Famer. What it does mean, though, is he's been playing well. Somebody asked me on Tuesday during our YouTube show if he had done it against number ones. And in camp, he has. So that's where people understand that when you're in practice, they roll Aiden O'Connell out there. And yes, Max Crosby's across the line and Marcus Peters back there. And so is Nate Hobbs. Those guys are all playing with the units mix and they play together because they want to see. They want to see what they have in that quarterback. And again, we're going to talk to Tom DeHart here after the break from goldenblack.com, who covered Aiden in college. But it's a good story, and it's really interesting because from a fan perspective, Mo, I think, Raider fans are so used to negative coverage, so they get this good coverage, and it almost makes them feel uncomfortable because you got Baldy doing a breakdown of Aiden O'Connell, you got QB School doing a breakdown of Aiden O'Connell, and people are like, do you mean the guy we took in the 4th round? Big deal. And people get nervous about it. But it doesn't mean he's going to be even a starting quarterback in the NFL. It just means he's off to a good start.
Right. What I will say, too, is that I think some Raider fans are used to things not panning out. Correct. They're used to it looking good at certain parts, and then it just doesn't pan out the way they think it is. So I think there's some cautious optimism there, and rightfully so, because they've seen a lot of bad things happen with their draft picks. So they're just kind of holding their breath, like, we'll just wait and see. A lot of Raider fans are just, let's wait and see, folks, and that's fine. But what I want to say, too, is that with Aiden O'Connell, I was critical of the pick because of his lack of mobility. There were some interceptions that I'll talk about with Dienhart today that we'll go through and get his insight on. But the fact that he was able to kind of not quell those concerns, but he had 2 quarterback sneaks for first downs. And I said this on the Silver and Black Blitz that while he has some self-awareness. So on the incompletion when he threw the ball away, it seems like a routine play, right? Nobody cares. But if he pump faked to get the defender to jump so he can throw the ball away, a lot of rookies take a sack there and a big loss. He's self-aware that he understands he's not a very mobile quarterback. He's not going to outrun a defender. So he has to be more crafty than a more dynamic quarterback like Anthony Richardson or Bryce Young, who can just probably evade a guy, juke and jive, kind of move out of the way. But Aiden O'Connell says, no, I understand. I'm not a mobile guy, so I have to be crafty. Pump fakes, gets the guy to jump. You avoid a big loss. You throw the ball away. You live to play another down. So I think that's part of the neck of qualities that Dave Ziegler was talking about that Aiden O'Connell has. He has the awareness, he has the smarts, and he has the poise to play the position.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of the things, too, because I went through 12 different scouting reports in preparation for the show about Aiden O'Connell. You mentioned some of the downsides, the upsides, but some of the nuggets that I pulled out, when you read them, you're like, yeah, Josh McDaniels, that system. Josh McDaniels, that system. So really interesting stuff. And when Tom DeHart comes up next, we'll be able to talk about that. All right, we're going to step aside for a break. When we come back here on Silver and Black today, we're going to be joined by Tom DeHart. He's a longtime Big Ten reporter, editor now at goldandblack.com. You may have seen him on Big Ten TV. He's going to give us the whole story around Aiden O'Connell here on Silver and Black today. You're with Mo. You're with Scott after I take a swallow, and we'll be back right after this break. Welcome back. Silver and Black today, an Odyssey original podcast, also heard on The Bet in Las Vegas. Thank you for being back with us. Moe Moton, Scott Gulbransen with you, and we're joined by a special guest. Talk a little bit about Aiden O'Connell, Tom DeHart, the editor-writer over at goldandblack.com. Probably familiar if you ever watch the Big Ten Network. You'll see him on there a lot. He's covered the conference for a long time as well as Purdue. Tom, thanks for being with us here today, talking a little bit about Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah, I tell you what, I got a chance to watch some of that game from the weekend against the 49ers. He sure did have a fabulous debut, and he's created some ripples nationwide, it looks like, with his performance.
Yeah, he sure has, and that's why we wanted to get in touch with you and talk to you, because having watched him, I mean, here's a kid, one of 6 children, coming up, hardworking family. He gets to Purdue, sits out 2 seasons, then he misses most of the next season because of a season-ending injury, and then has this 2-year starting run that he goes on and plays really, really well. Talk about getting to know him a little bit as a player there, and what kind of guy he was and why he was able to persevere through so much of those challenges.
I tell you what, the best way I can describe Aiden O'Connell is he's the kind of guy you want your daughter to marry. He's the genuine deal. And his story is really almost straight from Hollywood, and it's still being authored as we speak. Who knows where this is going to end, but, was a walk-on. His only offer out of high school, he's from suburban Chicago. His only offer out of high school was to a Division III school called Wheaton. Walked on at Purdue in 2017, was just a face in the crowd for a couple of years. And then, just sort of persevered. And I think, he got on the field in 2019 due to a series of injuries. Couple guys got hurt. One guy quit the team, and suddenly O'Connell was the starting quarterback, and he impressed. Then he got hurt, and then it was the start of the next year. Had another injury, and the last 2 years, of course, was a cut above, as they say. And a guy who wasn't on social media for most of his Purdue career just didn't think that was a good place for him to be. That tells you something about Aiden O'Connell right there as well. And got married before the start of last year to a Purdue volleyball player. So he's mature for his age, and a guy who always seemed like he had a real good head on his shoulders, and he's never been given anything. He's worked hard, and I think he's more talented than people really realize.
So, Tom, you talk about his maturity, and I think one of the things that Dave Ziegler, the Raiders GM, mentions is that he has the neck-up quality. So a lot of people focus on the physical. Can he move? Can he throw the football down the field? How does he process information in the pocket? But would you say this is one of the most mature collegiate prospects you've covered in your time? And how is that reflected in his play at Purdue?
Yeah, very mature. And I tell you what, it's so funny. Every year the NFL gets caught up in the same measurable stuff. Guy can throw the ball 70 yards, or if he can do a backflip or run a 4.5 40. None of that stuff matters at all. The only things that matter are your ability to read defenses, make quick decisions, make the right decisions, be accurate, and lastly, you got to be tough to stand in the pocket and let things develop. Those are what make quarterbacks great. Aiden O'Connell's, he's nimble enough to buy time in the pocket. And I tell you what, he had to overcome some personal adversity too late last year. Late in the year, he had a brother who tragically died. Almost didn't play. He was thought about just stepping away from the team for a while. And it was a pretty emotional time for him and his family. And yet another hurdle he had to sort of to clear through. So again, this is a guy who's never been handed anything. He wasn't a 5-star recruit. He never had a sense of entitlement. And that continues in the NFL. No sense of entitlement, a 4th-round draft choice with no expectations from anybody. And he's got a quiet resolve about him. And it's going to be really interesting to see what he can do here with his career.
Well, we talk about the his ability from the neck up, right, of processing, smart kid, good kid, and that ability to process at a quick rate. Obviously, we saw that in this preseason game with the Raiders. But when you look at what he excels most at from a physical standpoint, what did you see over the 2 years of him starting at Purdue that made you think, well, maybe this kid could make it to the next level because he's able to execute so well?
Again, I think number one is his accuracy. I think he's a pretty pinpoint passer. He's going to try to put the ball into tight windows, and sometimes he's going to throw interceptions. He threw a fair amount of them at Purdue, but he's going to try to thread the needle sometimes, maybe sometimes to his detriment. And I think that ability to make not just a quick decision, but the right decision. And he can throw most passes. So again, I think really that his ability to be accurate and his ability to make the quick decision and usually the right decision are a couple of things that really stood out for me. Physically, guys, he's a legit 6'3". He kind of has a dad body. He's not going to walk through the door. He's not going to impress you with a 46-inch chest or anything. But he's just an unassuming guy, very soft spoken. Like I said, he's already married and a good guy who he's going to take whatever life gives him. This isn't going to be what defines Aiden O'Connell. You got to think his life's got so much more even beyond football here.
So, Tom, you talked about those interceptions. I believe he had an interception in 7 straight games, 1 touchdown, 5 interceptions between matchups with Wisconsin and Iowa. But then he finishes the season strong. As you said, he had a tragedy with his brother, but then he comes back, beats Iowa, and gets Purdue to the Big Ten championship. They won the Big Ten West title. So just kind of talk about that game, him coming back from that tragedy with his brother and playing against Indiana and then winning, playing well.
Yeah.
I read that he basically was on the sideline crying in a towel at the end of that game. Just take us back to that moment and his resiliency in that situation.
Yeah, nobody really knew the real details of what had gone on. Just the fact that Aiden may not be playing in that game, that season finale last year at Indiana. And I think the TV broadcasters, caught some glimpses of Aiden on the sideline, and after the game or a day or so later, more of the story started to come out of what he actually had to walk through. So that was a big game for the program. And to walk out there on the road against your rival with a high stakes game, and for him to play and also just play well too, I guess shows you a lot too, and had to be tremendously difficult for him as well. So just another, I guess, chapter in the Aiden O'Connell story, at least at Purdue and West Lafayette, that's been remarkable. That I think guys should really land him a spot and produce kind of famed cradle of quarterbacks. They got a history here going back to Len Dawson and Bob Greasy and Mike Phipps and Jim Everett and Mark Herman, Drew Brees, a lot of great quarterbacks that matriculated through West Lafayette. And I think Aiden O'Connell deserves to stand shoulder to shoulder with a lot of the greats that I just mentioned.
Wow. That's strong words, and you've seen it all, Tom, I know. And that's the one thing too. I went through all the scouting reports, and like you said, they're NFL scouting reports, and there's so many examples of guys who, they talk about in his scouting reports the lack of a high-powered arm, not pushing the football downfield. But when you look at Josh McDaniels and him coming out of the Bill Belichick tree, and the fact that he coached there, that's not a downer for them. That's what they look for. They look for people who are system quarterbacks who don't want to extend plays out of the structure. I think that's why I underestimated Aiden O'Connell. I'm the first one to admit it. But seeing him run in that system, he may have found exactly the right place he needs to be. Maybe, do you think?
Yeah, that's what life's all about, fit, correct? And,
right.
And that certainly is a fit, like you just articulated so well, that Josh McDaniels / Patriots offensive system with the physical skills of a guy like Aiden O'Connell. Again, Aiden O'Connell's not going to be a star at the combine in shorts and in a tank top running 40-yard dashes and doing bench presses and whatnot. And you're right, Aiden O'Connell is not going to he doesn't have a can of earlier. I think a lot of those things, those wow factors, they're nice to have. It's like power windows on a car. You really don't need to have power windows on a car. Just again, my point is he can do everything well enough to be an effective NFL quarterback. He can make most every throw. And I think we saw a little glimpse of that. I know we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves and crown the guy some all-time great already. It's only been one half of a football game, but it's a nice start. And I think he kind of gave people a glimpse of what he's about. I think there's something there to work with. And who knows? You guys know that team better than I do out there. But, Garoppolo and Hoyer, I guess, have had injury issues during their career. And it's got to give the head coach, McDaniels, a little bit of a relief to know, hey, you know what? We have a guy here. If something happens, he has to play. Maybe we're not going to fall apart. And again, this is a guy who's 23 or 24 years old already, too. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, it'll be fun, too. And real quick, too, as far as the draft goes, I don't think anybody envisioned him going in the fourth round. I did. I thought he'd be a sixth or seventh round choice. So, McDaniels obviously saw something, grabbed him earlier than I think a lot of people thought he was going to go.
Yeah, and real quick, I know Mo's got a question for you, but I want to just build on that last point you made, because we were talking to Vinny Bonsignor a couple days ago, who's the beat writer out at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and he said that he had it on good authority from sources that the 49ers were actually interested. Kyle Shanahan loved Aiden O'Connell, and so they were concerned that they may take Aiden O'Connell before they had a chance to as well. So that's how that NFL draft sometimes breaks down. Mo's got one last question for you, Tom.
So Tom, you talked about the draft and the broadcast, and listening to it, there were some analysts that were critical of Aiden O'Connell, saying that his last year wasn't as good as 2021. And I think that it's unfair, or it just needs some context, because he did lose David Bell to the NFL draft. Milton Wright was, I believe, ineligible because of academic reasons. And then he had Charlie Jones, who was a graduate transfer. I believe you were the first to report that news that Charlie Jones is coming to Purdue. So he had a different supporting cast around him. And of course, interception, sometimes you have to look at it as it's not always the quarterback's fault. Sometimes the wide receivers don't come down with the football. Sometimes the ball bounces off of their hands. Just give your context and your analysis of what Aiden O'Connell was in 2021 versus 2022.
Yeah, you're right. His supporting cast may have been a little bit better in 2021. Yeah, you're right about Milton Wright. He was an academic casualty. Bell was off to the NFL. Charlie Jones was a highly effective receiver last year, though. Make no mistake about it. One of the best in the Big Ten, first team All Big Ten. And they had an NFL tight end, too, in Payne Durham, who was picked by the Buccaneers in, I think, the 5th round this year. So he had some guys to throw to, but if there was a fall off from 21 to 22, I don't think it was a precipitous fall off at all. Maybe a slight drop. The one thing that kind of tells you a lot about a team and a leader is winning on the road, close games on the road, and Purdue was able to pull out some close games on the road, sometimes against ranked teams, going into a place like Maryland, which is good when they beat them. They won over at Illinois. They won up at a tough environment in Minnesota, too. So I think that tells you a lot as well, to be able to win those games on the road. And they almost pulled one out at Syracuse. But, yeah, like I said, he had a solid year last year, but I think 21 was a little bit better. But I don't think it was a huge drop-off. I think the supporting cast, again, if 21 was better, I don't think it was, appreciably better than last year's.
There you go. Tom, listen, Tom DeHart, editor and writer over at goldandblack.com. And the expanding Big Ten, that should be fun to cover.
Hey, I'm hoping maybe at some point, that's going to be interesting to see, if they're going to stop there. Stanford's going to find its way in, or what's going to happen. But, I think Purdue fans, too, from a Vegas standpoint, they'd love to get out to Las Vegas Bowl here, maybe this year. Yeah,
and there's been some talk, too, coming out with Allegiant Stadium suddenly so popular because of the destination area, is that the Big Ten championship game perhaps could come to Las Vegas, which would be crazy to take but although it's not crazy anymore because of who's in the Big Ten now. It's all over the country, so who knows? Maybe you'll have a chance to cover that game there as well.
Yeah, I'd love to see that stadium. It looks like a beautiful facility. You guys have such a booming area out there. It's a lot of fun for fans, our sports fans especially, to be in that market with the Golden Knights and the Raiders. And I'm not sure where you stand with the Oakland A's, but
I don't think
it's not now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Baseball is popular in Nevada, as you can imagine, because of the weather. You have baseball all year round, but the A's are another story, so we'll see. But getting Major League Baseball would be another big thing for the city. Tom DeHart, editor, writer, goldandblack.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom DeHart1. Tom, again, thank you, man. We appreciate it. Have a great season.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the season, and I appreciate you having me.
All right, there you go.
Thanks, Tom.
Tom is just such a great guy, so experienced and such a good look, and really gave us some amazing insight that I had not heard yet. I'm sure it's coming as Aiden O'Connell ascends. As far as if he continues to play well, you're going to start to see a lot of feature stories about this young man, no matter if he's a backup or a starter, whatever it is over the course of his career. But man, you heard a lot of that first here, I think.
Right. I have a friend who follows Purdue sports very closely, so I knew about the Aiden O'Connell, knew about his brother passing. Unfortunately, yeah. I knew the story, but I didn't want to tell the story because I wasn't close to the program. I wanted someone who was close to the program to tell the story because I think he would be able to add more context to it, and he did. Tom did a great job of painting that picture of what Aiden O'Connell went through last year, and also comparing his season from 2021 to 2022.
Right. And this idea of him having a dad bod, and all this other stuff, we've heard stories, and I'm not going to go to the Tom Brady story because the Tom Brady thing, because then you start comparing him to somebody like that. That's not what I'm trying to do. Right. But there are stories every year in the NFL like this of guys who seemingly they're on the radar, but on the low end. And because of their life experience, because of their perseverance and their talents, they're able to kind of overcome and make something of themselves. We're not, like Tom said, we're not crowning Aiden O'Connell after 3 quarters of football, some amazing NFL quarterback, but an amazing story of a young man who's really overcome a lot and is off to a nice little start. So we'll see again on Saturday if that continues.
I mean, look at what we went through with Tom DeHart, what we talked about. Aiden O'Connell was a walk-on. He dealt with injuries early in his college years. He dealt with a shifting supporting cast, losing his top 2 wide receivers from 2021, and then having a new graduate transfer in 2022, while Charlie Jones, as Tom said, pretty good. You have to get used to having a new wide receiver out there being your lead guy, and then dealing with the tragedy with his brother, all while at Purdue. So for him to go through all of that shows the kid is resilient, shows he's mentally tough. Again, neck-up qualities matter because in NFL, it's not always about the physical. You have to be able to be a pro, be able to compartmentalize things that are going on in your life and still perform. His brother tragically passes away. He goes out and leads Purdue to Big Ten West title over Indiana. So that tells you a lot about who he is and his mental makeup.
It does. Amazing. Crazy what he's accomplished so far as a young guy, only 24 years old. But we'll see. It's going to be exciting to watch how he develops in whatever role it is with the Raiders. Okay, we're going to step aside before we come back for the final segment of Silver and Black today on this edition. And that, of course, is your segment. It's the mailbag segment. So don't go anywhere. You're with Mo and Scott. This is Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Welcome back. Home stretch here on Silver and Black Today. It's time to hear from all of you. It's time for the mailbag.
Raider Nation is never shy. You ask, we answer. It's time for the Raider Nation mailbag. What's on your mind, fam? Drop us an email at mail@silverandblacktoday.com. That's mail@silverandblacktoday.com. Now, it's your time to speak up.
Oh, yes, and speak up you always do. We never have to worry about Raider Nation telling us what they think, Mo. That's never a problem around here, is it?
Absolutely not. They tell me what they think every day on Twitter, either in the mentions, the DMs. And
oh yeah.
If they saw me on the street, they'd probably say, hey Mo, I read your column. I agree or disagree with this or that.
And apparently, as I shared with you yesterday, as we look at the data around our quote unquote ratings or downloads, we're very popular in New York City. It's crazy. It must be all about Midtown Mo.
I'm just saying,
it's all females from New York too. No, I'm just kidding. But
I'm just saying, it's very interesting to see New York City in our top 5 of cities that download our podcast. So shout out to everyone in New York City who's listening.
Yes.
If you're a family member in New York City, shout out to you, friends, people I went to school with, former teachers, professors. Shout out to you for supporting the podcast. I appreciate it.
Yes. That basketball coach you have at St. John now. What's his name again?
Oh, yeah. Man, I wish.
Oh, yeah. That's good. Hey, let me tell you, they'll be better. That's for sure. Okay. By the way, too, I also love that because Raider Nation is so vocal, when I make mistakes, which is all the time, they correct me. And, sometimes that's where in social media, we talk about what a cesspool it is. But sometimes you make a mistake and people make a mistake and they get angry when people point it out. I actually appreciate it. I'm like, hey, you're right. Yeah, I screwed up. I didn't see Byron Young playing. I went to the stats. He wasn't in the stats. I said, well, he didn't play. And they don't do snap counts during the preseason. Usually the NFL keeps snap counts. So you know exactly how much somebody played. And so one of our listeners corrected me. I was like, oh, you're right. I went back and he sent me video. It's hard to deny the video. I just missed it for some reason. Because even though you watch a game, and of course the second and third time I watch the game, of course you see it there. Anyway, all right, we're going to get on to the mail. And we start off with one of our serial mailers. I don't mean to make that sound like he's a creepy dude because he's not. He's a very cool dude. And that is Gary Harkenreader, our loyal listener. And he, of course, everybody wants to talk about Aiden O'Connell. We just talked with Tom DeHart, and thanks to him again for that great segment and getting some more insight there into the young man, to the Irish cannon. I'm sticking with it. I know people call them super troopers and all that, but that just sounds too goofy. Yeah, because he looks like the Corey. Yeah, exactly. Big Corey, exactly. So, but anyway. So Gary always writes, and he was writing about Aiden O'Connell, but he's got a little interesting point. He says, okay, with all the Aiden O'Connell buzz, I thought I'd chip in with this. Brian Hoyer's role is to school O'Connell and Garbers. Gary, you had to mention Garbers. Anyway, the Raiders are only going to keep 2 quarterbacks on the active roster. By the end of training camp, Hoyer retires and becomes a coach with the Raiders. O'Connell's number 2. Garbers is practice squad. Hoyer's retirement opens up a spot which will be filled by defensive linemen. This will fulfill Dave Ziegler's statement that the Raiders will, quote, the new Raiders will come in waves. I see you like to take notes during your show. He's talking to me. So please write this one down so you'll remember where you heard it first. There you go. Gary says Brian Hoyer will retire because Aiden O'Connell is going to do so well. Hey, it's possible, Mo. People in the chat on YouTube on Tuesday were like, settle down. He's not going anywhere. I said, no. This is about him being the number 2, which is an important role when you have Jimmy Garoppolo as your quarterback.
Right. It's not about, and I said this on the Silver and Black Blitz, that I want to see Aiden O'Connell play 3 quarters again against the Rams on Saturday, because the only way he's going to be ready to possibly fill in for Jimmy Garoppolo if Jimmy Garoppolo is hurt is that he plays. He has to get those reps. He has to get those snaps, because that's the issue with Trey Lance right now, is that he simply hasn't played enough between his last year in college and to now. He's played, I believe he started in a handful of games. He had 1 game in the COVID year in 2020, played 2 games as a rookie, and you wonder why he looks so raw, is because he hasn't had the reps. So Aiden O'Connell getting these valuable reps and snaps is important. No, he's not going to be the starter. That's what they signed Jimmy Garoppolo for. But as I've said a million times, Jimmy Garoppolo is probably going to miss 3 to 4 games at minimum. So your backup quarterback has to be ready to play. And to Gary's point, Gary Harkenreader's point, I don't want to see Brian Hoyer. Brian Hoyer is the teacher in that quarterback room. I don't think he's going to see the field. He may, if they feel Aiden O'Connell still needs more time to practice or more time to develop. But I doubt Brian Hoyer is going to be QB2 to start the season. I think it'll be Aiden O'Connell, assuming he continues to play pretty well in the preseason. Now, his theory about Brian Hoyer retiring and opening up a spot for another defensive lineman is a theory that I've also heard on social media, and I could see it happening because, as I said, Brian Hoyer is turning 30 years old in October. Now, that's not old in real life years, but in football years, 38 years old it's ancient. So yeah, I just don't want to see Brian Hoyer on the field. If the Raiders have to go with the backup, go with Aiden O'Connell and let him get his reps, because you don't know what he's going to be. Because Kirk Cousins is a former 4th rounder, Dak Prescott is a former 4th rounder. They're outliers, of course. You don't have many 4th round stars in the league, but we don't know what Aiden O'Connell could be yet, and you won't know that until he actually plays in real games.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. But Gary, anyway, thank you so much for that. Gary also, by the way, donated some books. He sent me some old Raider books that we're going to donate to Raider Dad so that they can auction them off, whatever they get for him. So thank you to Gary for that. I have not forwarded them to Josh out in Vegas yet. He sent them to me last year, but I just wanted to let Gary know and thank Gary on the air for what he's done there, because that's pretty cool. Some really cool stuff. Maybe I'll share them on a show so you guys can see what they are, so you can go bid on them when they're up for bidding. But thank you again, Gary.
Gary Harkerread is already in the Hall of Fame of our listeners.
He is a listener Hall of Fame. There's no question.
He is that dude when it comes to
he's on the Mount Rushmore already.
Definitely.
Okay, so now we're going to a quick question for Mo. This is right to you. This just right to him. It says, Mo, who do you think is winning so far in the battle for the last outside cornerback position with Hobbs and Marcus Peters? That's from Rich in Sacramento. By the way, you can hear me twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays in Sacramento on ESPN 1320 with D-Lo and KC talking Raiders football. And I'm sure Rich, he says he's a new listener, so that's good. Thanks for being with us, Rich. Mo, the question, outside spot.
So, Rich, Marcus Peters and Nate Hobbs did not play in the first preseason game, so all the competition is basically at practice, which we are not at practice. But I will say this, based on the reports, Nate Hobbs is probably going to be the starting slot cornerback. So what you're looking at is Marcus Peters on one end on the boundary, and Jacorian Bennett, Duke Shelley, David Long Jr., Brendan Faison. One of those guys are going to be the other outside cornerback, because while Nate Hobbs did say that he'll line up wherever the Raiders want him to line up, Vic Tafe had a report saying that he does prefer to play in the slot. And I think if he's battling with Tyler Hall for the slot position, I think experience is going to win out there, because we all saw what Nate Hobbs can do in the slot as a rookie. I think he goes back to that spot where he played well, and they open up a boundary spot, assuming Jacorian Bennett continues to show out this offseason. Or maybe they go with a veteran like Brendan Faison, who has experience and played with the Raiders 2 years ago under Gus Bradley in a different system. But I think you're going to have Marcus Peters and one of those guys. Nate Hobbs will be in the slot, simply because I'm hoping it's Jacorian Bennett. To be honest with you, I'm hoping it's Jacorian Bennett and Marcus Peters, because those are the two guys that are going to go after the football. Because as I've said, the Raiders have struggled in forcing turnovers. Jacorian Bennett, from what we've heard from camp, is beginning after the football, and we know Marcus Peters' track history as a ball hawk.
Yeah, and Vinny talked about it, Mo, during the show, and that was he believes Jacorian Bennett's got the inside track already. It's early, yes, but he really believes that's what's going to happen. I told him we're the Jacorian Bennett PR machine here on Silver and Black today. So if you want to call us homers, you can call us homers for him. But anyway, so he talked about that, and he talked about how deep that room is now with Hall, with those guys back there, the fact that they actually have some good depth now, and the fact that you have a rookie coming in who's probably going to start there on that other outside position is amazing. Because then if something happens, if he struggles at times, if he goes down, whatever, because there is attrition in the NFL, then you're going to feel much better. He felt like, 6-7 guys deep in that defensive backfield. It hasn't been that way in a long, long time for this Raiders organization.
You mentioned depth, and I'll say this on a kind of a sour note. I'm kind of worried about our guy, Meek Robertson. I don't know if he's going to make the roster simply with all that competition and depth. I'm not saying I'm doubting him, because I had worries about him last year. But as you said, there's just a lot of bodies in that room and a lot of young guys. And if Jacorian Bennett is showing out early, if he's the starter, it pushes everyone else back one spot on the depth chart. And makes you think, is Meek Robertson going to be the final and last 2020 draft pick to get the axe?
Yeah. And I don't know. He can be assigned to the practice squad if they want to keep him. Yeah,
they can.
So, but it's a good problem to have, right, Mo? Which is, it sucks to say goodbye. I had a fan say this to me the other day on Twitter. It's like, yeah, it's going to be terrible because I like so many of these young guys, but I know they're all not going to make it. That happens every year, right? And so you're going to see that, and that's a good sign. That means you have good players in there. You're not out signing people off the street at the last minute. You have good depth, so that's a good one. But thank you, Rich in Sacramento, for that question. We appreciate it. We move on to my man, Manny. He is my dude, and I'll tell you why. When you hear the email, Mo, you'll understand. This one's to you again, not to me, though. But he's still my guy. Hey, Mo, give Zamir White a few more weeks before you judge him. He wasn't overly great against the whiners. He calls them the whiners. But I think he has what it takes to be a starter in the league. Shout out to Scott, and thanks for the great shows during the summer from both of you to get us to the season. That's Manny in Los Angeles. Mo has been so down on Zamir White.
I want to be clear about my analysis on Zamir White's preseason performance. All I'm saying is Zamir White wasn't terrible, but he wasn't spectacular either.
Correct.
He was just okay. He was just okay.
I agree.
And that's not a criticism. I don't think
Not
that's
at
a
all.
criticism. And I said this. I said this on Twitter X that when a team has a great performance, I think a lot of people fall into the trap of, oh, everybody was great. Everything was great. And it's hard to point at certain areas where guys could be better or things could improve because everyone's caught on, okay, the overall performance was great, so that means everyone was great. And I was just saying that Zamir White while the Raiders were great overall, he was not great. He was just okay. And that's not a bad thing. It's just I want to see more from him. And I'm not judging him. He had a year last year where he barely touched the field because Josh Jacobs ran wild. But I just haven't seen evidence that he could be that guy you want to give 15 carries to yet. I'm not seeing it, especially at 3.3 yards per carry. I know he had some backups on his offensive line. I understand that. Damian Williams had the longest run for the Raiders running backs in that preseason game at 14 yards. Zamir White had 9. There's a play that a lot of people are criticizing. I'm not going to crush him for this because it was just one play. But he was one-on-one with Jair Brown, the rookie safety of the 49ers. Couldn't break the tackle, went down before the goal line. A lot of people saying, well, Josh Jacobs would have scored that. I'm not going to hold Zamir White to the Josh Jacobs standard because Josh Jacobs is one of the premier running backs in this league. So it's unfair to compare Zamir White to Josh Jacobs. But what I am saying is that if he's the guy that's going to go down off a one-on-one tackle, you might want another finisher in your backfield. You might want to add another running back who maybe is a stronger finisher near the goal line, who may be a better pass catcher out of the backfield. That's all I'm saying is that Zamir White wasn't bad. He wasn't spectacular either. He didn't wow me.
No, and I think the point you brought up to me when we talked about it in the post-game show, and I agree with you on this one, I just thought he was efficient at times. The first drive was great, but you're right. You have to be able to get some yards after the after the hit, after the tackle, or contact, excuse me. There, I got it right. Yards after contact, yak. But at the same time, I agree. You need to, for example, against the Rams, I want to see him over 4 yards a carry on average. Like, to me, the breaking point there, it has to be over 4. You can't be at 3.8. You can't be at 3.3. You got to be over 4. It's just the way it is. If you're going to be a starting running back, and I don't think he will be. I have 90% confidence Josh Jacobs will be there week 1. But if you want Zamir White to develop into one of those guys, but Mo, it goes back to the system too, though, right? Which is we saw what they did in New England. I think they're going to do the same thing here. I don't know that you'll have, once Josh Jacobs goes, whenever that is, if it's next year or the year after, whatever, I don't think you'll see a Josh Jacobs in the Raiders organization. I think you'll see the running back by committee. You'll see a guy have a flash for a year or two, and you'll have 2 or 3 guys that run the ball. People might not like that because they love Josh Jacobs with good reason, but I think that's what we're on the precipice of. I think that's what we're going to see in the future.
So 2 things. On the Silver and Black Blitz, I said Zamir White, I want to see more from him. The Rams gave up 214 yards rushing to the Chargers in the first preseason game. No Aaron Donald on the field. The Chargers ran up and down the field on the Rams. And as we all know, the Chargers have struggled to run the ball with consistency. So I want to see more than 3.3 yards per carry for Zamir White on Saturday against the Rams. The other thing to your point is I think we're going to see a running back by committee this year, whether Josh Jacobs is back or not.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at Zamir White, and to the Zamir White, question, if you're looking at Zamir White as the eventual successor for Josh Jacobs, when or if he eventually moves on, then he has to be more efficient with his carries, because if you're getting 12 to 15 carries, you should be getting over 50, at least over 50 yards rushing with that. Yeah. And if they don't see that from him, as you said earlier in the first segment, they're going to have to draft the running back.
Yeah, no, they will have to, and we'll see. They may, depending what happens, especially I think this is a big week at the running back position. If Zamir White doesn't overly impress again, then you might see them sign somebody off the street too, just a veteran that can come in and you can count on for some carries, because you still don't know what's going to happen with Josh Jacobs. Even if they have every indication, and like I said, I believe he'll be there week 1, you still need to make alternate plans just in case. So we'll see how it goes. But you're right about that Rams defense. Without their starters, it should be a nice night to run the football for Zamir White, Abdullah, and the rest of the running back room. So we'll see how it goes when it happens out. Go ahead, Mo.
And the other thing is, I don't want to I want to sound like I'm picking on Zamir White, because the Raiders as a team average 3.4 yards per carry.
Mm-hmm.
Their running backs, their ball carriers as a team. So that includes, Sincere McCormick and Damian Williams and Amir Abdullah. Maybe if Zamir White isn't overly impressive, maybe we see more Sincere McCormick, who scored 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing, one pass catching against the 49ers. We'll see how it shakes out. But I'll be interested to see more efficiency against the Rams on the ground and who gets a lion's share of the carries.
Yeah, absolutely. But we thank you for your question as always, guys. That's Manny in Los Angeles. Thanks for the joke there. Of course, we're just chiding Mo a little bit on that one. So all good. Well, that wraps up the mailbag, Mo. We had some more. They were a little repeat. We'll get to your questions next week as well. But we certainly appreciate you guys listening to the show. And coming up, Mo, I know are you doing your Bleacher Report live after the game, despite the late hour on the East Coast?
Yeah, they have me up burning the midnight oil after the Raiders-Rams game. Right after that game, I'm going live around midnight Eastern time. Of course, it'll be like 9 p.m. for the West Coasters. But I'll be live. But if I finish early like I did after the first preseason game, I'll hop on with you and maybe Murph if he's still on and just give my thoughts on the aftermath of that game. That
sounds good. We would love to have you, but we also know you're going to be doing that. And yes, it will be a late night. These damn 6 p.m. preseason starts. Come on, Los Angeles. Really? You couldn't do it in the afternoon, 3 o'clock on a Saturday, maybe? But anyway, that's okay.
For the East Coast. No respect for the East Coast.
No. So we'll do that. But what else you got coming up from a writing perspective that people need to look out for here the rest of the weekend to the weekend?
Actually, I'll be covering. Well, this has nothing to do with Raiders, but I'll be covering Friday preseason games. I'm sure Raider fans don't care about that because Raiders don't play on Friday. But I'll also have a depth chart. I'll have my first depth chart. I know The Athletic released their depth chart this week. I'm going to have a depth chart after the Rams game of who I think is going to make the final 50-man roster. A lot of people have asked me questions about how many quarterbacks we're going to keep, how many offensive linemen, how many defensive backs. I'll answer all those questions with the depth chart that I release. After the game, I'll also have another silver and black blitz, probably, especially if I'm not on the post game with Scott Gulbransen and Murph. I'm definitely going to have a silver and black blitz, just giving my thoughts. Not going to be too critical of anyone because people get sensitive about Zamir White and people like that. But I'll definitely give my honest thoughts about what I thought about the game and players' performances.
Nice. There you go. So do that. Also, yeah, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. I usually say that early in the show, but if you don't already subscribe, and this is the first time listening or watching up on YouTube, subscribe on the audio side. Even if you don't listen to the audio, just do us the favor of subscribing and putting on our download. That helps us with our ratings, our downloads. It's good for us. So please, and we would appreciate that. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit subscription, hit the notifications bell. That's the most important thing. That way you know when the video comes up. And also, we go live after all the games now, too. We had some technical difficulties that are all worked out now. It's preseason. Just like Zamir White, we had to get past that 4 yards of carry. For us, it was just audio. And some video distribution issues, but we got there. We'll get there, so it'll be better. So yeah, join myself and Murph, and if Mo can pop in, he will towards the back end of the show once he's done with Bleacher Report. Make sure you check out Mo's Bleacher Report show as well right after the game too, and follow him on Twitter, Moe Moton, MoeMoton. I am at LV Gully. Also, we will have the show. If you missed the post-game show because you're out on that Saturday night after the game, you can hear it pretty much in its entirety on Sunday on The Bet in Las Vegas. Of course, that's our radio station in Las Vegas where we have our show every Sunday morning at 5 a.m. Yes, the prime slot we have, 5 a.m. That's because all the betting content starts at 6, so you can't do everything's betting after 6 a.m. So that's where it is, but you can catch us there on The Bet. Mo, as always, my man, I appreciate a great show with Tom DeHart. We'd like to thank him again for coming on. Great to deep dive a little bit on Aiden O'Connell.
Absolutely. We got to continue to push the Irish Cannon. If you're listening to the show, please, if you don't want to call him AOC for political reasons, call him the Irish Cannon. Hopefully it sticks.
All right. For our producer, Mike Robier, for my partner, Moe Moton, I am Scott Gulbransen, and this has been Silver and Black Today, an Odyssey original podcast. Take care, everybody.